Yeah, he's alright. Okay, let's do this properly. Let me ask you a question. Do you remember using the Anemo Traveler? I mean, he's kind of iconic, right? Anemo was the first element we gained in the storyline, and this is the character that we essentially learn how to play Genshin Impact with when we all logged in for the first time. Sadly, for the majority of players, he is usually the first one replaced. Often even before Amber gets cut. And as for the other Traveler elements are concerned, Anemo is usually the last one people ever even think about. It's not standout good like Dendro is, and it's not terrible like Electro. It doesn't really have much of any reputation. Now, recently, live on my stream here on YouTube, me and my chat rated every available Traveler in the game, and Anemo ended up faring pretty well for itself, beating out most of the competition. So I took the time to do some Abyss runs, multiple builds, and lots of farming. Just to try to find out if the Anime Traveler still holds up today in a sea of other Anemo characters. But first, let's talk about what he actually does. Let's quickly go over the Anemo Traveler's entire kit. Even though we should all know it. Well, it was in the tutorial. But it's been a while, so... never mind. That's enough stalling anyway. Traveler's normal attacks are fairly underwhelming, being somewhat slow, though it does have a unique passive that affects it. We'll have to talk about that a bit later though. For their skill, they unleash a sort of vortex that rapidly deals Anemo damage, as well as absorbs any element that it comes in contact with. Baseline, it doesn't have any pull to it, like many other good Anemo support abilities. However, that does change with Constellations. Next up is his Burst, which unleashes a tornado which picks up enemies, dragging them away while dealing Anemo damage, as well as picking up the first element that it comes in contact with, much like the skill. And this will deal even more damage. For their first passive, at the end of their normal attack combo, they deal a bit of Anemo damage. This is actually pretty cool, making him sorta work as a reaction driver, sorta like a discounted Sucrose when you think about it. Obviously, this skill still has issues, namely that is at the end of his combo, which is fairly long and agonizingly slow. For their second passive, the Traveler heals for a small amount of health when, and only when, their skill kills something. On top of that, this effect has a 5-second cooldown. This is garbage, and its sole reason for existing is simply so they could make the pun second wind, and I am 100% sure on that. Next, given that they are all given to us for free, we definitely need to talk about the Traveler's Constellations. C1, Traveler's skill, gets some pull for a bit of extra crowd control and grouping. This is decent for what it is. C2, energy recharge is increased by 16%. Though free energy recharge is good, this feels extremely underwhelming compared to what you can get off of artifacts or even just a good weapon. We take it, but it's not that great. C4, damage taken is reduced while channeling the Traveler's skill. This is okay. If it came with resistance to interruption, I think it would be much more exciting, but on its own, it's sort of just a whatever con, definitely a sign of the times. And finally, C6. Enemies damaged by the Traveler's Burst has their Anemo resistance, as well as whatever element the burst picks up's resistance reduced by 20%. This is honestly very good, and definitely gives a real argument to give the Anemo Traveler a try, even in the modern day. On top of that, it is also one of the very few ways to reduce Anemo resistance, making it somewhat unique in what it does. Before getting into teams and the like, I want to briefly talk about the build that I'll be going with. Starting with the weapon, I ended up going with the new Battle Pass sword, just so I had an excuse to use this thing, given that it's actually pretty good. Gives a lot of crit rate, as well as increasing skill and burst damage. But other than that, you're generally spoiled with choice for weapons on the Traveler. 5-star weapons like Jade Cutter or Skyward Blade are general standouts, or 4 stars like Iron Sting or any of its fellow EM weapons for better swirl damage, or any of the energy recharge weapons in the game, as the Traveler's Burst is a big part of their kit, and their energy generation is a bit lacking. For artifacts, you really can't go wrong with your standard Viridescent set, focusing on EM or attack and crit stats. Honestly, there's not really a bad way of doing this. VV is such a good set that the rest of the stats don't really matter, depending on how you go about it. I opted for a more damage-oriented set just for a bit of variety. Here are the stats that we're going to be working with. For teams, honestly, again, we are just spoiled with choice. I did a bunch of runs with teams like Freeze, National, as well as some more unique ones like a Nervalette-focused team, a Wanderer team taking advantage of the unique Anemo resistance shred, and finally what I like to call a hit-them-from-anywhere team. More on that later. There are a few teams worth talking about in detail though, so let's start with the most overpowered character in the game, Nervalette. This team is honestly one of the best arguments for the Anime Traveler, since even though the tornado will drag enemies away from you, leading you in a Benny Hill-inspired chase scene, Nuvi actually doesn't really mind this. Being able to follow behind the tornado without any issues, dealing massive damage along the way. Given how strong Nuvi is, you can literally run him with anyone, but I think this team comp sort of breathes a little bit of new life into him. At least for me, given how fun this was to actually pull off. Next was Wanderer, and it was okay. There are definitely better ways of getting Anemo buffs than this, such as Farazan or even a higher Constellation Gene. Again, another character that can actually chase the tornado with some success. The team felt okay, but I definitely was wishing towards the end that I just used Farazan instead. Finally, I went with a team that just didn't care where the enemies were after the tornado, focusing on the interaction between Shogun and Nahida. Honestly, this team did better than I expected, and it felt pretty good, just watching enemies go up in smoke as the tornado dragged them away. Turned the tornado into a sort of microwave, which is kinda cool actually. Overall, going back to the Anemo Traveler was pretty interesting. Here was a character that I replaced nearly instantly, and now I'm finally able to appreciate what they could have been bringing to the table the whole time. Though we have much better options for Anemo supports now, such as Sucrose and Kazuha, for newish players out there, or for those who are just incredibly unlucky, maybe go back and give this one a try. You might find yourself pleasantly surprised. Anyway, here's a quick showcase of my Abyss runs, and I'll see you on the other side. Truly, the Anime Traveler is one of the characters of all time. Not the best, but definitely earned the title of niche. If I could make changes to buff them, I'd love it if that normal attack passive just worked differently. Since his attacks are so slow, maybe increasing his attack speed or having it do less damage more frequently. Or, ideally, just maybe shortening his combo string to make it a bit faster overall. And of course, the biggest change of all, man, I just want to see that tornado stay still. We all got reminded by the Hydro Traveler that a burst that moves away kinda fast is pretty useless and feels sorta bad in a lot of cases. Thankfully, what he does is still good, so even with all these weaknesses holding them back, the Anemo Traveler holds up actually somewhat well. If you like what I'm doing here and you want to see more, please like and subscribe, and please leave a comment if you still use the Anemo Traveler today. Also, I do stream on YouTube Monday to Friday at 10 AM to 2 PM Eastern Time, so if you want to stop by and join the Traveler conversation, please. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, that's all from me. Cheers.